Today is September 17th. It is Constitution Day. This is a very important day in the history of our country because it is the day when the United States Constitution was born.
The Constitution is the framework of our very own government. It is the document that explains our rights as citizens of the United States of America.
Good morning, students. Happy Constitution Day to all of you. Are all the groups ready to give their presentations?
As ready as we'll ever be.
Glad to hear it. Let's get started. When I call on your group, I want you all to go to the front of the classroom to give your presentation. First up is the group assigned to research and present on the history of how the Constitution came to be written.
The Constitution was written in 1787. At the time, the United States was a brand new country made of only 13 states. It was clear to the leaders of this new country that the rules and laws needed to be established so the country would run smoothly and fairly.
From May to September 1787, a group of men called Framers met in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. They took turns presenting their ideas and convincing the other men why certain things should or should not be included in the government they were trying to create.
Did you notice that Lucas said men? That's right. No women were involved in this process. At this time in American history, women were not allowed to be involved in anything like this. These rights were only given to white men.
Anyway, once the framers came to basic agreement on how the country should run, the Constitution was written. It was adopted on September 17, 1787, and then sent to each state for approval. All 13 states eventually agreed to or ratified the Constitution.
Great job. Okay, let's move on to the group covering the amendment process.
Our group thinks that the framers of the Constitution were pretty wise. They actually recognized at that time that what they had written and adopted was probably not perfect.
The first 10 amendments in the Constitution are called the Bill of Rights. Our group is going to explain each of those amendments in kid terms.
The First Amendment says that the government cannot make a law that limits the freedom. Each person has to practice their religion, to speak freely, even if the government does not agree with what they are saying, and to get together in groups. The First Amendment also gives people the right to ask the government to change things they don't like.
The Second Amendment says that the government cannot keep law-abiding people from having protection, since it's important to keep peace.
The Third Amendment says that people cannot be forced to let soldiers stay in their homes during times of peace. In times of war, certain laws must be followed in order to do so.
The Fourth Amendment says people have the rights to be safe in their house and should not have their property searched or taken without just cause or a good reason. If the government feels there is a good reason, they must have a search warrant that states exactly what they are looking for and where they can search.
The Fifth Amendment deals with the person's rights when being charged with a crime. A person cannot be charged with a crime unless the charges have been brought by a grand jury. A person can't be charged with the same crime twice and does not have to testify against himself or herself. The Fifth Amendment also states that people must be treated fairly by the law and must receive money if the government takes a person's property.
The Sixth Amendment also deals with a person's rights when being charged with a crime. A person has a right to a quick and public trial, a fair jury, and a lawyer to help present his or her case. A person also has a right to be told what he or she is being charged with and to face those who are saying that he or she broke the law.
The Seventh Amendment says that when one person sues another and the amount of money involved is more than $20, the case can be presented to a jury and the decision made is final.
The Eighth Amendment says that executive or expense without a good reason, bail, or fines cannot be given. This is also the amendment that says that cruel or unusual punishment isn't allowed.
The Ninth Amendment is pretty simple. It just states that people have other rights not especially stated in the Constitution.
The 10th Amendment and final amendment included to the Bill of Rights says powers not given to the national government are given to the individual states. In the words, if something is not covered in the Constitution, it's left up to each state to decide or add to the Constitution in the future.
You 5 did a super job of explaining the Bill of Rights. Let's go over some of the other amendments that have had a significant impact to millions of people over these last 200 plus years. Let's hear from the group covering the amendments that did away with slavery.
In 1787, when the Constitution was originally written, slavery was both common and illegal. Most black people living in America were slaves. As time went on, however, many people began to feel that slavery was wrong, that no human should be owned by another person.
However, slavery was an important way of life to white people living in the southern states. Without slaves, who would maintain the plantations and farmland that those in the south depended on it for their livelihood?
Most of the southern states felt that it still be left to each state to decide whether so be legal or illegal that the United States government should stay out of it. This was a key argument leading up to the Cleveland War.
Those of us in Mr. Williams' class last year, and probably everyone else who knows that the North won the Civil War, and with that slavery ended. It was the end of the Civil War. And 13 and 14 and 15 amendments were added to the Constitution. These 3 amendments are also known as the Regularization Amendments.
The 13th Amendment made slavery illegal. The 14th Amendment says that every person born in the United States is a full citizen, even former slaves.
The 16th Amendment gave African American men the right to vote, as it states that a person cannot be denied the right to vote because of his race or skin color.
Excellent. You all have done such a great job with this project. Zach, I was happy to hear you state that African American men were given the right to vote with the 15th Amendment. It's the perfect transition to our next group, who is going to tell us about the amendment that gave women the right to vote.
In 1787, when the Constitution was written, women had no role in government. Their role in society was simply to take care of their husbands and children. We cannot really imagine this today, but it was the way of life back then.
Think about it. Without the right to vote, men didn't really care about what women thought about issues. Men in the government didn't need to listen to women, as they had no voting power to cause any change anyway. Even though the thought of women without equal rights as men makes no sense to us today, when you stop to think about it, it becomes much easier to see why women were not granted the right to vote until 1920.
Yes, when women were given the right to vote in 1920, when men in government had no choice but to listen to the issues important to women. If they didn't, they risked not being elected back to office.
The 19th Amendment was officially ratified, or agreed to, on August 18, 1920. It states that no person shall be denied the right to vote on the basis of gender.
Thank you, Tiffany and Sam. Okay, let's move on to the groups covering the 3 branches of government that was set forth in the Constitution. Let's hear from the group covering the legislative branch.
Simply put, the legislative branch makes the laws.
The man and the woman elected to the legislative branch are as a group called Congress.
Congress is divided into 2 houses, or parts. One house is called the House of Representatives and the other house is called the Senate.
Perhaps you are wondering why Congress is divided like that. Why not have just one single Congress? Wouldn't things be a lot easier that way?
Well, I think this is pretty interesting. The two-house legislative plan is also known as Great Compromise.
Back in 1787, when the Constitution was first being developed, there was a pretty big argument on the number of representatives each state should be allowed. The larger states felt that the number should be based on each state population. However, the smaller states wanted their voice to be heard equally and felt that each state having the same number of representatives was the way to go.
The Great Compromise balanced these opposing wishes. The House of Representatives would be based on the state's population, while the Senate would have 2 representatives per state, regardless of its population. Today, there are 100 senators, 2 from each of the 50 states, and 435 representatives.
California has the most representatives with 53, followed by Texas with 36. And believe it or not, there is a currently 7-way tie for the state with the least representatives. Alaska, Delaware, Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Vermont, and Wyoming all have just 1.
There is one other important fact to know about the legislative branch. In order to pass a law, both houses, the House of Representatives and the Senate, must agree to the exact same law. A new law cannot pass without agreement from both houses.
Great job. You presented us with some very interesting facts. My notes tell me that we have but one final group. Let's hear it for the group covering the executive and judicial branches.
The executive branch is headed by the President of the United States. The main role of the executive branch is that to make sure laws are carried out.
The last group talked about how the legislative branch makes laws. Well, before a law that has been passed in Congress becomes a real law, the President must agree to it. The President has the ability to veto or reject a law if he or she wishes.
If the President vetoes a law, it automatically goes back to the Congress. The Congress can then override that veto with 2/3 of approval by both houses. This is an example of the checks and balance system that has been built into the Constitution. It helps protect against any one branch of our government becoming too powerful.
The third branch of government is the judicial branch. It includes the Supreme Court as well as the federal courts leading up to the Supreme Court. The role of the judicial branch is to interpret the law.
Sometimes the judicial branch determines that a law is unconstitutional or not in line with what has been started in the Constitution.
The judicial branch also plays an important role in protecting people's rights. The Bill of Rights includes a number of individual rights granted to people to make sure they are not punished for a crime unjustly. The judicial branch of government is set up with an appeals system where people can take their case to a higher court for review.
The last court a person can appeal is to the U.S. Supreme Court. They have the final say on a matter.
That's our final say of this matter. There's so much more to learn about the Constitution. You all did a super job with the assignment you were given. You will learn much more about this when you are in high school, but hopefully you have learned something today that will be of use when you're watching a news report on television or hearing about an upcoming election. I've got one final task for you. When you go home tonight, quiz an adult on something you learned today, and see how much they know about the Constitution.